Once upon a time, in the heart of the Middle East, a growing threat loomed over U.S. soldiers stationed in Iraq. The ominous presence of ISIL cast a shadow over the region, creating an atmosphere of tension and uncertainty. As rockets rained down, the soldiers braced themselves for the challenges ahead, knowing that their mission was more critical than ever. With each passing day, the stakes grew higher, and the need for vigilance became paramount. This is their story, a tale of courage and resilience in the face of adversity. The specter of ISIL is rising once again, casting a long shadow over the fragile peace in Iraq and Syria. After years of decline, the extremist group is showing renewed vigor, carrying out increasingly brazen attacks. This resurgence is a stark reminder that the threat of ISIL is far from extinguished. Attacks attributed to ISIL have surged in recent months, targeting both civilian and military targets. The group has exploited security gaps and capitalized on the chaos to regroup and rebuild. Their tactics are evolving, employing a mix of guerrilla warfare, suicide bombings, and targeted assassinations. The goal is clear: to sow terror, undermine fragile governments, and re-establish a foothold in the region. Despite suffering heavy losses, the group has proven adept at evading capture and replenishing its ranks. It continues to exploit sectarian tensions and grievances, finding fertile ground for recruitment among marginalized communities. The resurgence of ISIL demands a sustained and coordinated response from the international community. The United States finds itself at a crossroads in Iraq, caught between the need to counter ISIL's resurgence and the desire to reduce its military footprint. The Biden administration has pledged to continue supporting Iraqi forces, but the question of how best to do so remains a subject of debate. The recent withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan has fueled concerns about a potential security vacuum in Iraq, one that ISIL could exploit. The U.S. military has stepped up its operations in Iraq and Syria, carrying out airstrikes and raids against suspected ISIL targets. However, these efforts are constrained by the political realities on the ground. The Iraqi government, under pressure from Iran-backed militias, has called for a complete withdrawal of U.S. troops. This has put the U.S. in a difficult position, forcing it to balance its security interests with the need to respect Iraqi sovereignty. The Iraqi government is caught in a difficult balancing act. On one hand, it needs the support of the U.S. and its allies to counter the threat posed by ISIL. On the other hand, it faces growing pressure from Iran and its allies to expel foreign forces from Iraqi soil. The Iraqi government has repeatedly called for the withdrawal of all foreign troops from its territory. However, Iraqi officials also acknowledge that their own security forces are not yet ready to fully take on the fight against ISIL alone. The country is deeply divided along sectarian lines, and its political system is plagued by corruption and dysfunction. The Iraqi government's efforts to balance its security needs with its desire for sovereignty will be a defining challenge in the years to come. The Iranian factor fueling regional instability. Iran's influence looms large over Iraq, adding another layer of complexity to the already volatile situation. Tehran has been a key player in Iraqi politics since the U.S.-led invasion in 2003, providing support to Shia militias and political parties. While Iran played a role in combating ISIL, its actions often exacerbate sectarian tensions and undermine Iraqi sovereignty. Tehran has armed and trained Shia militias, many of which operate outside the control of the Iraqi government. These groups have been accused of human rights abuses and attacks on U.S. interests in Iraq, fueling tensions between Washington and Tehran. The rivalry between the U.S. and Iran has often played out on Iraqi soil, with both sides vying for influence and control. The SDF's struggle. Holding the line in Syria. Across the border in Syria, the U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, are facing their own set of challenges in the fight against ISIL. The SDF, a Kurdish-led militia, has been a key ally in the fight against the extremist group, liberating large swaths of territory from ISIL control. However, the SDF is now facing a resurgent ISIL, which is exploiting the ongoing civil war and the withdrawal of U.S. troops to regroup and launch attacks. The SDF is stretched thin, responsible for guarding thousands of captured ISIL fighters and their families in overcrowded detention camps. These camps have become breeding grounds for extremism, with reports of radicalization and recruitment efforts taking place within their walls. Adding to the SDF's woes is the ongoing Turkish offensive against Kurdish-controlled areas in northern Syria. The Turkish offensive has displaced hundreds of thousands of civilians and forced the SDF to divert resources away from the fight against ISIL. The need for a new strategy, addressing the root causes. The resurgence of ISIL is a stark reminder that military force alone cannot defeat extremism. While military operations are necessary to degrade ISIL's capabilities, they are not sufficient to address the underlying conditions that allow groups like ISIL to thrive. A lasting solution requires a comprehensive strategy that addresses the root causes of extremism, including political instability, sectarianism, corruption, and lack of economic opportunity. This requires supporting inclusive governance, promoting economic development, and addressing the needs of marginalized communities. By creating a more just and equitable society, we can undermine ISIL's narrative and reduce its appeal. The international community must work together to address the transnational nature of the ISIL threat. The future of the fight, a long and uncertain road. The fight against ISIL is far from over. The group has proven to be resilient and adaptable, exploiting chaos and instability to regroup and rebuild. The U.S. and its allies must continue to support local partners in Iraq and Syria, providing them with the training, equipment, and resources they need to counter ISIL. This support must be tailored to the specific needs and contexts of each country. The international community must also address the broader political and economic factors that contribute to instability in the region. The fight against ISIL is not just a military campaign, it is a struggle for hearts and minds.